Welcome, everybody. So first and foremost, thank you all for taking the time out of your busy schedule for this webinar, Helping Students Learn More with John Hollingsworth. He's the co-author of Explicit Direct Instruction and the co-founder of DataWorks Educational Research. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to introduce Mr. John Hollingsworth as the speaker of our webinar.
Okay, thanks everyone for being here. So you can see one of our big focuses is explicit direct instruction. I've got the title up here on the screen. But we also have a lot of instructional practices we use, and I want to use these practices during the training. So I'm just going to pick a couple of them right here, like pronounce with me. I'm going to teach you to say words. We're going to do tracked reading. We're going to read academic sentences together. Gestures, pair share, attention signal, whiteboards. We can emulate whiteboards. We may not actually have them. And then we want to talk about responding in complete sentences. So let me just start with one practice here. Students need to be able to pronounce the new words during their lessons, especially the new content and academic vocabulary. So I'm going to start right here. Listen carefully, everyone. You're going to be my students. This word is explicit. Let's all say it together. Explicit.
Explicit.
One more time, everybody. Explicit.
Explicit.
This is direct. Let's say it. Direct.
Direct.
And the last one, instruction. Everybody? Instruction. Now I'm going to say all the words and you can say it after me. Explicit, direct instruction. Class, your turn. Go. Explicit direct
instruction.
Okay. So this is just one of our first strategies, and you've got big words in the lesson: distinguish, determine, photosynthesis. So there's plenty of words you need to use these strategies for with your students during the lessons. All right. Now, I like to think about what do you see when you walk in the classroom. This is a presentation that could work for teachers, but it's also for administrators. And I want to give you an example of something I saw in classrooms. So this is a class observation a couple of years ago. I went into 45 classrooms in two campuses. So if you look up here, these are the common lesson components you would see: a learning objective, activate prior knowledge, concept development, all the way down through independent practice. Now this is 100% all the way over here. That would be 45 teachers. We only saw a learning objective, I think, in one teacher right here, like 5% or 4%, one teacher. Connecting to prior knowledge, that's part of brain research. That's how humans learn. We barely saw that. Concept development, I see that. Now, this is two schools. We have the blue school and the orange school. It looks like it's way out here, but it's only like about 30%. And so if we even go down here, independent practice, a large number of students were just working by themselves doing independent practice. And then let's look at now some of the delivery strategies, all right? Asking higher order questions. One school had 0, and the other had maybe, 10%. Pair shares. Did we pair share with our partners to practice our information, to be ready, to help ourselves learn, to help remember? Almost not used, just a couple of teachers. Whiteboards. I think I have a whiteboard here someplace. Whiteboards is so you can show your answers to the teacher, and the teacher can see everyone, and everyone participates. So almost not used. Sentence frames, that's academic language, complete sentence, a couple of teachers, but very few. And let's just skip to the last one, students working by themselves. That's doing independent practice, sitting on a computer, silent reading, going over homework, doing something, but they're actually not being taught by the teacher. So let's just look at this. In one school, close to 50%, another school, close to 75%. So this is one of the things that really kind of got us started in EDI and classroom instructions. We were not always seeing effective strategies in the classroom. One of my standard practices is to have a checking for understanding on every slide or every couple of minutes. So I've got the question right here. So everybody, we're going to read together. Ready, read. What would your school look like using this observation form? So I want you to think for a second. Would you see a lot of students working by themselves? Would you see a lot of the teachers standing up and teaching? And what about the strategies to checking for understanding, the whiteboards, the complete sentences? So I'll give you a second to think about that, and we'll call someone and see if they can report out the kind of things they see. I will note we also have educators from India here, so we'll be hearing their responses also. All right, let me call someone. Derek, could you say something? What type of things do you see in schools where you've been?
Yeah, so when I see some classroom observations, a lot of times I see a lot of teacher talk, and I see a lot of students not interacting. And there's a lot of time that goes on when the teacher's talking, 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 talking. And I see students kind of glazing their eyes and looking up at the ceiling and, playing with things. And these are great moments where the teacher needs to stop, check for understanding. But we don't see that happening often enough.
Yeah, I think that's fairly typical. Daraj, I don't know if you have any comments what you've seen in India. Remember, we just heard from some Indian principals just a couple of days ago.
Yeah, and most of the principals we speak to in India, they all mention that the interaction, the student-teacher interaction is very low, and you would see almost 80% teachers, delivering like a monologue in most cases, rather than making sure that every student is interacting. They would focus on just delivering content. That's it.
Yeah. And I think some of you know DataWorks has a tutoring program in Dubai in the Middle East. We're working with a lot of students over there. And the rule over there is that teachers should only be talking 40% of the time. 40% of the time. The students need to be talking more. Of course, this is the extreme, pure ELD. But everybody's correct, we need to have more interaction, more engagements with the students. All right, let's look at this next slide. Some people asked about the history of DataWorks. How did we end up where we ended up? So we started in 1997. That's 27 years ago. And John Hollingsworth, there's my name. And Dr. Sylvia Barr is my partner, actually my wife also. And she has a very extensive educational background. She was a high school physics and chemistry teacher. She was a high school principal, a middle school principal, and a district assistant superintendent. And so when we actually started working with DataWorks, I started on my own. Eventually she realized she could quit her day job and join DataWorks. We started by analyzing tests. We actually worked with about 600 schools. And we basically found out you can't raise test scores by analyzing test scores. It's kind of funny. We need to make a switch. And we had this aha one day when a principal said, don't show me the test scores, show me how to raise the test scores. And then we said, wow, we need to switch to classroom instruction. It's teaching that raises test scores. And so our first big research project was the 2 million student assignments we collected. And we found a lot of students being taught below grade level, sometimes 2 or 3 grade levels below grade level, basically preventing them from doing well on tests. If you're teaching below grade level, you're actually a remedial school. You need to be a standards-based school, like teaching on grade level and preparing students for the upcoming tests. Not just for the tests, but helping students learn more. All right, then the next thing we did is we went into classrooms. So we ultimately went into 25,000 classrooms. We've been in a lot more now. And after we did the classrooms and some research, really wrote the book Explicit Direct Instruction. It's a direct instruction model, or some people call it an explicit instruction model. And then we put together edusary.com, which is our curriculum, our online curriculum of 3,000 lessons in ELD program. So really, we made that switch from tests to what? Instruction and curriculum ourselves. And you can see a couple slides here. We're training in China, and there we are training in the Netherlands. You can see the writing up in the background where Sylvia and I were analyzing lessons at a teaching competition. And so we were looking that over. So we started thinking about, well, I think we should all read the question together. Okay, everybody, let's read. Ready, go. What is effective instruction? So we started thinking, so just in general, what is effective instruction? Okay, and if you look up here, effective instruction, an evidence-based plan, look at this, creating and delivering well-designed and well-taught lessons. So it's 2 things. The lesson itself, the design part, that's what you put up on the screen. I've got bullets, I've got bolded words, I've got illustrations. And the delivery is the things I've been doing, like we're going to do checking for understanding questions, choral reading, and stuff like that. So you need both lesson design and lesson delivery. So I want you to think about this for any instructional model you're using at your school. And of course, what we're using is explicit direct instruction. So let's look at the characteristics of effective instruction. I think we can all read it together. Ready, go. Designed to produce at least 80% student success, then corrective feedback to 100%. All right, so what this actually means is whole class instruction to 80%. If you raise the whiteboards, you've only got 50%. It's boards down and reteach. Now, you don't need to teach to 100%. I used to think that was a good idea. It actually takes too long. You're reteaching the whole class for fewer and fewer and fewer students. So the idea is you give corrective feedback to the individual students who have errors, a couple of quick cues and prompts, tell them where to look, help them get the answer, and then you get your 100%. But 80% is the whole class goal. Now, some schools I've been in, we're moving on with not enough students with us. Let's look at the next characteristic of effective instruction. Let's all read it together. Ready, go. Works with all grade levels and disciplines. Okay, so we know it's going to work from kindergarten, or foundation as they call it in Australia, all the way up to high school, to secondary, to 11th and 12th grade. So the strategies, effective instruction, it shouldn't matter what you're teaching or what grade level you teach. And I will notice we've had researchers work with us. This is used for medical instruction in the military, this type of direct instruction or explicit instruction. All right, I'll let you read the last number. Effective instruction. Students learn concepts even if there are some sub-skill errors. Let's all read it. 100%.
100%.
So the idea is, if we're going to teach something like long division, the students know the routine. They might make a math fact error or a math mistake, but they know the idea of what we're doing. Students know compare and contrast text structures, similarities and differences. They may not be a great reader or a very strong reader, but they can still analyze. They understand the new concepts. They understand the new concepts. And I'm saying this because a lot of schools get stuck in sub-skills, and they keep teaching sub-skills. They're not moving the students on. Students can learn new concepts. All right, the last one, characteristics of effective instruction. Increases motivation. And here, you should be taking some notes right here. Write this down. How do you increase motivation? And here's how we do it with EDI. Number one is non-volunteers. So if you write that down, non-volunteers, we pull sticks and everyone has to respond. Number two, we include lesson importance or lesson relevance. Every lesson needs to convince the students this is something important to learn. And the third reason we create motivation is the outcome. I can do it. Students learn something new and they're able to do it by the end of the lesson. So let's see, what are the three things? Can we say it again? For motivation, number one is what? Non-volunteers. Number two, lesson importance. And number three, I can do it. All right, approves attendance. This was a problem in Australia when we worked there. I don't say teachers have to be funny or entertaining, but it's just school has to be pleasant. You have to be engaged. You're learning something. You're active. Your mind is engaged, and then you'll tend to come to school. If it's not engaging, I don't want to say boring, but if it's not engaging, then kids tend to not come up. Now, encourages more students to turn in homework. We're talking about effective instruction to turn in homework. And here's the secret to homework. You can write this down. Students already know how to work the problems before they go home. Homework is not to learn how to do something, it's practice for automaticity. It's actually a cognitive strategy, repetition to get faster and to get better. So make sure you're not sending homework home where you expect the parent or the students to learn how to do it on their own. And reducing discipline problems, this is interesting. A lot of the things we do, like we're all going to read, we're all going to hold up our whiteboards, we're going to pair share, I'm waiting for someone, that high level of engagement actually kind of suppresses it. It actually suppresses it. So it's pretty interesting. It actually does reduce discipline problems. We're not spending our time addressing discipline. We're spending our time, suppressing it in the first place or preempting it from actually happening. I will say a lot of disciplines are the students in the back by themselves. They're not engaged. They start talking. They start doing stuff. So we get everybody pair sharing, everybody answering. It really helps. This is the last thing. This is the book, Explicit Direct Instruction. This is the second one, the second edition. And these are bestsellers in the United States. There's an English learner version, a French version, and there's also this one in the Netherlands in Dutch. It's actually the number one. You can see it's the number one book. I think it's been number one for several years. And they're really into EDI there. We went there. They have EDI schools. They have little, decals on the school and posters to show they've been trained and are actually doing it. It's funny, the classes are in Dutch, but I could see the practices. I could see the pair shares, the non-volunteers, and all the type of things. Now, one of my rules is not to talk too long. I'm really at the limit of talking too long right here. So we need to have a checking for understanding question. So we're all going to read it together. Let's read right here. Ready to go? What insight
insight
did you
did you
have
have
about
about
effective
effective
instruction?
instruction
Why?
and why?
Okay, now some of you aren't talking, so we're all going to talk. And when you answer, you're going to use this sentence frame. Ready, go. My
My
insight about
insight
effective
about effective
instruction is
instruction
blank
is blank
because
because
blank. Okay, now, why don't you get a piece of paper out that can simulate a whiteboard and just write 2 or 3 things on your paper, and then you can be ready. So part of whiteboards is like wait time, like you're ready. If I call you, you've got something to show me right there. You're not thinking on the spot. And it really helps you learn because you're being prepared more. So let's do it right now. Write a couple things on a piece of paper, and then you can be ready to hold it up to the camera and show me. Now, I know we're on a webinar right here, but if we were in a real classroom, I'd be saying turn to your partner, read your answer to your partner, make sure you've got your complete sentence. My insight about effective instruction is, and both partners talk. This is part of checking for understanding. It's also a cognitive strategy to help you learn. All right, I think we're ready. I think the command usually with whiteboards is chin it, which means hold it up to your chin or up, up, up. So let's see the whiteboards right now. Whatever piece of paper you've got, up, up, up. All right, I see a couple of them coming up. All right, so I'm going to call someone, Vishal. We've got a lot of people from India today. Can you give me your answer and make sure you use your complete sentence? My insight about.
My insight about effective instruction is learn concepts because once the concept is clear, it is embedded in in your brain as a long-term memory.
Yeah, and we're trying to do conceptual knowledge as opposed to what answering questions or multiplying numbers. Conceptually we're doing area, volume, circumference, and not just multiplying numbers together. That was a great one. Now in a classroom you would call 2 or 3 students. I'm just calling one today so we can just see the examples of it. Now I know we're going to have principals in here, so I want to just give a couple of things about instructional leadership. So instructional leaders run the instructional program. That's why it's called instructional leadership. You're running the instructional program. So instructional leaders, look right here, focus on the instructional program. Plant managers focus on the facilities. Now, if you're a principal, I want you to think about this. Is most of your time spent doing the bus schedule, doing the mechanics of the school, or are you out in the classroom looking at instruction, talking about instruction, going to meetings with teachers, supporting the instructional program? So think about this shift in focus for an instructional leader. And the next thing is instructional leaders, good instructional leaders, maintain a relentless focus on improving how students are taught. You might say your complete job as a principal is what? Continually improving the effectiveness of classroom instruction. I like to think this is like industry in the automotive business or something. You're trying to what? Improve the product, improve the production capacity, improve the methods of manufacturing. So part of this in the school would be what? Your job is what? Improve the process of instruction, kind of continually. Now, you've probably heard of the achievement gap. The achievement gap is the difference between different subgroups in your school. But good leaders close the implementation gap. And what we mean by that is the implementation gap of teachers using strategies. And let me just give you one right here. Complete sentences. We saw a few minutes ago, very few teachers were using complete sentences. So the implementation gap is we would like to get a minimum of 90 to 100, well, 90% is the minimum, and up to 100% of teachers using complete sentences. So that's what we mean by the implementation gap. There's some other strategies on this page. I'll just give you one. Articulate a coherent instructional vision. So you need to have a very clear idea what good instruction looks like. And everybody's got that same vocabulary. Everybody knows what concept development is, checking for understanding, what complete sentences mean, the idea of using choral reading to support reading and engagement. Those are just a couple of ideas for instructional leaders. And I'm just going to let you think right now. How will you change as an instructional leader? I don't have any principals with me right now, but for those of you watching later at home, if you're a principal, I want you to think anything on this page, even some things I didn't mention down here, how will you now change as an instructional leader? So now let's look at the next part. You've probably heard of brain compatible teaching. We want to be brain compatible also. So let's pick a couple of highlights about the brain that affects learning. And let's look at the first one. The brain takes in 40,000 pieces of information per minute. Let's all read the next part. It's important. Ready? Most is
Most
not
is not
retained.
retained.
And this is the problem. This is the teacher talking right here. It's coming into our sensory memory, that's your ears or your eyes looking at the screen. It's not getting transferred to our working memory, to our conscious memory to think about it, and it's not ending up in long-term memory where we can retrieve it later. And let's look at this next part. The brain cannot distinguish between what to remember, the teacher talking right here in the front of the class, or a conversation with other students in the cafeteria. The brain has no way to make a judgment call of what it should remember. But let's read the next one. This is the key idea. Ready, go? The brain retains what is rehearsed and applied. Now think about that. What you repeat, and chanting could be one of these. 6 times 8 is 48, 6 times 8 is 48. But we don't just mean chanting, we mean discussing, thinking, talking about it, working another problem. And here's the research right here. Effective instruction provides interactions with the content, and the research is we need 24 exposures. So let's just look at how we can get a couple of them. These were some of the practices we said we would like teachers to be using. So let's all read the first way to get some more interactions, more exposures to content. Let's read it together. Ready? Choral
reading.
Now I just did it right there. I had all of you say it. Now sometimes we do the pre-reading. So students, let's look at this. Choral reading. Let's all say it. Choral reading. So when we say how many interactions can we get, the choral reading can give us 2 interactions. One time when the teacher reads something, and another time when the students read. Of course, this reading is what? The learning objective, concept definitions, questions, examples, all parts of the lesson. All right, how else can we get repetitions and interactions? Let's read the second one. Pair shares. So pair share, A partner tell B. B partner tell A. A, explain your thinking to B. B, explain your thinking to A. So the pair shares can actually count twice because we're saying it and hearing it. It's kind of multimodality, saying it physically and then actually hearing it again. So really the choral reading can give us 2. The teacher reads, the students read. The pair share, as the 2 partner reads, can give us 2 more. So how else can we get some interaction? Let's read together. Answering questions. Okay, so the general rules, we call on 2 or 3 students. I typically call on 3 students. So when we call on 3 students, we hear the answer 3 times, don't we? Because it's being answered 3 times. And usually as a teacher, you're kind of elaborating, oh yeah, that's correct. The first step in mitosis is interphase because blah, blah, blah. So you're getting a reinforcement by the answers and the teacher kind of paraphrasing it, sometimes tightening up and reaffirming what they just said. So questions could add another. It could be 6, right? 3 answers and 3 repeats by the teachers. Okay, whiteboards. We do whiteboards, of course. Everybody's holding up their whiteboard, so everybody's getting repetition. They had to write something on their whiteboard, so that's a repetition. They had to think about it. They had to prepare their complete sentence, how they were going to answer it. And let's read the last one. Solving problems. Now that can be the homework. It could be class problems you work in the classroom. It could be part of the guided practice where the teacher works one and you work on that back and forth. All right, so I have a question on this page. And so remember we said the research, we need 24 exposures. I gave some examples here how we could get some exposures. So let's read our question together. No, I'm going to pre-read, you're going to read after me. How will you provide interactions in the classroom? Let's all read, go. How will you provide interactions in the classroom? Now, I use the word interaction because that's the vocabulary that's of the part I'm teaching right now. So make sure your question include the vocabulary right in the spot where you're teaching. Okay, let's read the word, say blank, blank. So let's read. I will provide interactions by blank because blank. Okay, great. So get your whiteboards out again. In the classroom, it'd be your plastic whiteboard, but for the training, it can just be a piece of paper. And so just write down a couple words. Now you can make a judgment in the classroom whether you want the students to write the complete sentence out or just use it orally and you just have to write the answer on their whiteboard. I've done it both ways. I think it's good to have the students write the complete sentence occasionally because first of all, it's forcing them to write the vocabulary. The text is compare and contrast structure because it's forcing them to write the phrases compare and contrast text structure. I don't do it every question because it takes a little bit longer to wait for the students to write. And of course, the very young students in K and Foundation for Australia, we usually use these yes, no. I don't know if you can see with the red and green dots, and we just have the students hold up for young students who are not at the writing stage yet, but they can show an answer very quickly with that. Okay, in the classroom, I would say turn to your partner. I said, let's have the A's go first this time. We don't have partners, but we can just pretend we've got our partners. Let's see our whiteboards, up, up, up. Everybody up. All right, I think I'm going to call in Derek, and don't forget your sentence frame. I will provide interactions by, and then tell me why.
I'll provide interactions by pair shares because brain retains what is rehearsed and applied.
And the pair share gives you one of those, right? We're
Absolutely.
doing it 2 times, and you brought up that applied part. We're just always repeating something. We're applying the knowledge to a new example or to a new problem or something. That's a good one. Okay, Daraj, I'm going to call you. I'm sure you've got something here. I will provide interactions by.
I will provide interactions by whiteboards because it enables me as a teacher to look at all of the students what they have understood at the same time, and it also
Okay,
gives them to practice once by themselves.
great. Makes everybody do it. That's a good one. I see we just have a new person came in. I'll let you get logged in for a second. We're being very brain compatible right here on this part of what getting the interactions, and the brain will remember. The brain will remember. And another piece of research, the checking for understanding, like these questions I'm doing right now, that's another interaction. It's forcing you to think about it. And some people say that checking for understanding is a cognitive strategy helping you learn, just talking about it, thinking about it. Usually checking for understanding is for me to decide, do I need to reteach to speed up or slow down? But the checking for understanding interaction is helping you learn. It's forcing you to think about it and apply what we're learning. Okay, let's look at the next slide. Remember a while ago we said effective instruction is well-designed and well-taught lesson. So this is the design part over here. How is a lesson designed? And this is the delivery part. So the design has lesson components, and the delivery includes checking for understanding, student engagement. We've been using some of those. Another important one is the effective feedback. What do we do when students have a wrong answer, and how can we address that? So let's look at the lesson design for a second. I'm just going to go over 2 things right here. Is concept development. It says right here, written definition. So if you're taking notes for concept development, don't skip concept development. Don't start working the problems right away. Make sure you've got a written definitions and examples to go with it. Volume is, compare and contrast text structure is, photosynthesis is, quadratic equations are. Make sure you've got a written definition that students can look at. It's got academic language in it, and you've got examples to show what it is. Don't jump to the worksheet too quickly. Now the next one, skill development and guided practice. You've heard these terms before. The way we use them is skill development is the teacher modeling a problem. That's you working a problem, showing your thinking. And your checking for understanding questions should be students, how did I solve this first problem? How did I do it? How did I know to do this? Where did I find the information? Then the students do what's called a mirrored problem or a matching problem or similar problem, maybe a different paragraph or different set of numbers, and they work it on their whiteboard. You check the intermediate steps so that they're doing it correctly, and then your question is not just what is the answer, it's how did you get the answer? How do you know that's correct? Justify your answer, explain your thinking. So let's review this again. The first problem is worked by the teacher. Let's everybody point to ourselves. We're the teacher. We work the first problem. The students do the second problem. So point out there, students do the second problem. Okay, great. So that's just a little bit on that. Checking for understanding. I have several screens on that, but let's just go over one important thing right now is the non-volunteers. We're going to use non-volunteers. So this is a change for some teachers. They're used to doing the hand wavers. And in those thousands of classrooms I've been in, the hand wavers, you notice it's the same 3 students for the whole year. We're not getting the students around the edge, the peripheral students, or the other students. We just keep calling the same students. And actually, as a teacher, you're being fooled. So non-volunteers is what makes checking for understanding statistically valid. It's that you've randomized. It's like a study, like a survey. All right, the student engagement, we're going to go over that in a couple of minutes. And then the next one is the corrective feedback, effective feedback. That's the last part of checking for understanding. What do you do when students have wrong answers? And I'm just going to read one of them right here. Let's just read all of it. Ready? Ready? I'll come back
to you.
So this is a great strategy. I'll come back to you. This is what happens when you catch a student off guard or they're not ready. He said, okay, listen carefully. I'm going to call someone else. I'm going to come back to you. And you might even call two students. You want to get that correct answer out in the room. It's floating around. And then you come back and say, now I'd like to ask you. Now this also works. This was a big aha. I think some of you know I was in Texas doing demo lessons, K-12 demo lessons. And one of their big takeaways was how we addressed students who didn't want to participate, or low interest, what they call low interest, low participating students. And this was the number one thing I did. I'm coming back to you. I'm coming back to you. And so very quickly the students learned, that, oh yes, we're all going to participate. We have to be ready. We need to have our whiteboards. They just can't tune out and be skipped by the teacher. We've got our non-volunteers. We're calling them. We're going to come back to them. All right. So let's look at a couple of these right now, the student engagement norms. Oh my gosh, our insights. I have a question right here. So let's read it. Everybody ready? Read. What insights did you have about lesson design or lesson delivery? My insights were blank because blank. Okay, on your whiteboards, this is the standard practice. We write on our whiteboards. Okay, and then you can tell me something you learned, maybe something about lesson design, something about checking for understanding. These we've talked about a little bit already. I gave you a couple over here. I'll come back to you. And let me just give you the last ditch is let's read the answer together. We're going to practice the answer if you can't come up with it. Of course, 2 wrong answers is reteach the whole class. In a normal classroom, we'll be doing a pair share. I think I've got my hint right here. A, go first. I'm trying to alternate A, go first, B, go first. You'd be talking to your partners using your complete sentence. And notice we always have a because. You have to justify, like, why did you select something or why did you have that? All right, let's see the whiteboards. Up, up, up. All right, I think I'm going to call on Vishal. Can you come up with one? My insights.
My insights about my insights were that skill development and guided practice would lead to better understanding in a classroom.
Okay, and who teaches the first problem?
The teacher.
And who teaches the second problem?
The student.
Even doing my gesture to cue you. By the way, that's one good thing of gestures is we can help people do it. So skill belt and guided practice is one, and this is something we don't see in the classroom too much. I'm glad you picked that one. Okay, let's go on to one more slide. Now, I know we're going to have some leaders in here and principals, and I want to include a little bit of instructional leadership in here. So training is easy. We are doing the training right now. Implementation is what is hard. So let me just give you a little research, and this will be useful for teachers also. So this is the research, Joyce and Showers. It's a famous study. If you go to a professional development or watch a webinar, just like we're doing right now, the implementation rate, how many people will implement what they were just taught, is 5%. It's unbelievably low. We give the training on Thursday or Friday, and by Monday, you're back to your old practices. It's like in one ear and out the other. Now, seeing a demonstration. Actually, you've seen me do checking for understanding on every slide. You've seen the pair share, so that's helping a little bit. I'll play a couple of videos in a minute also. Now, the next one would be practice. So I could have you practice writing me a checking for understanding question or write me a sentence frame or something. That we haven't done that yet, but that would be the next level. You would actually practice. But this is really what makes professional development work is the in-situational coaching. That means you're standing right there with them at the same time doing the coaching and cueing them to do something. Maybe they forget the pair share. I stand right next to us and have the kids pair share, right? To call a non-volunteer, get your sticks. So if you look at the percentage, we've gone from 5% to 90%. You cannot get implementation without coaching. So administrators out there, my big suggestion here is make sure you have coaching. Every teacher seen every week, and not just the pre-meetings and post-meetings. This means you're standing in the classroom at the front of the room and you're cueing the teachers. Now, I did this last week in Texas, and the way I do is I teach with quadratic functions. I taught the lessons first while the teacher was watching me. Then the next period with a new set of students, the teacher taught it, but I stood up there and gave him some cues and prompts if he forgot to do something. Later, the principal said that teacher's lesson was the best lesson he'd seen the whole year at that school. wow, this coaching really works. He saw me, I stood up there and cued. Every kid was engaged. They all had their whiteboards. We used complete sentences. We retaught. I mean, everything kind of clicked. So I'm just telling you, administrators, you need to get to the coaching level to make it work. Okay, teachers, this is why it's so hard for you to implement. Your daily activities are habits. Your car drives you to work. You don't drive to work. Your brain, your subconscious drives you to work. When you start teaching, you fall back on your old strategies and you don't remember to do the new ones. Your habits kind of take over. So just like the students, we need those 24 repetitions. Teachers need repetitions. One of my coaching 2 weeks ago was have the kids read, have the kids read, have the kids read. I must have done that 50 times over 2 days because the teachers were used to reading themselves. So schools need to have processes in place for the teachers to do it. So teachers, your brain is holding you back because you have to, I have a phrase, rewire your brain. So this is the research for teachers. It's not that you don't want to do new practices. You forget because your brain kind of takes over. So as you rewire your brain and start using pair shares, complete sentences, teach first, ask a process question, then they become your new habits and they're very easy to do. All right, so for administrators, this is going to be my question for you. And maybe I'll give the answers. I'm not sure we have administrators right now. How will you provide in-situational coaching? I will provide in-situational coaching by blank because. So I'm just going to give a couple of answers for you right now. We don't have any administrators right here. But schools that have full-time coaches, they need to be out in the classroom every day. Don't use them for Xerox people, for errand people, for helpers, for secretaries to pass out things. Have them in the classroom doing real-time coaching, which means they're standing up at the front of the room queuing. Now, my advice for administrators, principals, assistant principals, you should also be out in the classroom every day, and you should see when you float in the classroom, if they forget to pair share, you could say, oh, could you have the kids explain their answers to each other so they'll be ready? You should be queuing also. And principals used to say, I don't have time to get in the classroom. And then afterwards they say, wow, the more I'm in the classroom, the less problems kind of happen at the school. It's kind of like a preemptive one. So keep this in mind. If you're an administrator or you're a coach, your job is to be in the classroom doing real-time coaching. That's the most effective. That's this 90% here. You can have pre and post meetings, but the real change is the cueing them in the moment and then they implement it in the moment, not discussing it afterwards. All right, so back to student engagement. So this is two things for administrators. You want to understand the practice, see them, cue them, and teachers, we're going to start using them. So the first one is pronounce with me. Let's all say it. Pronounce with me. You're going to teach students how to say new words. It's very easy to do. You point to the words and have the students pronounce the words. Now make sure you look at the word because we want to support reading at the same time. It's not pure listening and speaking. It's can we actually read the words because these words are going to show up in the academic text and also in tests. All right, I'm going to play a little video right here, so let's look at a couple.
Compare. Can we read it, please? 1, 2, 3. Compare. Can we read it one more time? Compare.
Distinguish. 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 One more time. Distinguish. And let's say it regular, but saying distinguish. Distinguish. Figurative. Can we read that together? Figurative.
The word represent. Can you say the word represent? Represent. Now look at the next part. The people in Congress are called representatives. Representatives. Let's say it together. Representatives. And say it to your partner twice. Representatives. Okay. And we call them representatives. Tectonic plate. Can you say that? Tectonic plate. There's 3 types of plate boundaries. How many? 3. Okay, I'll say them, you say them after me. Convergent. Convergent. Divergent. Divergent. Transform. Transform. Okay, so let's just go over the 3 types.
All right, so let's look at a high school lesson. As soon as you start this lesson, you've got some words to pronounce right here. Euphemisms and oxymorons. So these are new words the students have probably never read before or said before. So this works all the way up to high school. We need to do it at the high school level. We've got new words in every lesson. All the way first grade, elementary, all the way to high school. Be ready to pronounce new words. Usually what happens is you see kids mispronounce during the lesson, and then you correct it. We're going to kind of preempt it because these are going to be important words that are going to show up over and over in the lesson. All right, and I'm just going to give you one more trick. This is a good one. This is just a technique how to do big words. This is a great big word. It's very long. I could probably not sight read this word or sound it out, but I think I can do it from the back. We're going to do backward syllabication. The reason we do that is when students say a long word, they dribble off by the end. They dribble off by the end. So I'm going to start it back here. So listen carefully. I'll say it and you'll say it after me. Nucleic. Your turn.
Nucleic.
One more time. Nucleic.
Nucleic.
Nuclear.
Now ribonucleic. Your turn. Ribonucleic. Okay, now I'm going to add oxy, like oxygen. Oxyribonucleic. Your turn. Oxyribonucleic.
Ribonucleic.
Now we're going to add D. Deoxyribonucleic. Let's all say it. Deoxyribonucleic.
Deoxyribonucleic.
Okay, now let's say it all together. Deoxyribonucleic.
Deoxyribonucleic.
Okay, turn to your partner. Everybody turn. Say deoxyribonucleic twice.
Deoxyribonucleic.
Deoxyribonucleic.
Ribonucleic.
This is so amazing. I can read this as a sight word, deoxyribonucleic, just like that. So don't be afraid to pronounce words. You'll hear mispronounced words. Simile is one for elementary. They call them smileys. If you ever mispronounce it, you'll never recover. You need to get simile. The word is simile. Okay, so any words like that. I think we've run out of time for this webinar. I know we can talk about other things at another time. And I think I'm just going to let you think for a minute today. Is there something you could take home that you could apply in your lessons right now? We talked about these engagement norms. I think I've used all of them in the training. We talked a little about checking for understanding. You saw me do checking for understanding. We did the pair shares. We picked non-volunteers. The corrective feedback. We have the strategies. I'll come back to you, explain your thinking, read the answer with me. 2 wrong answers, reteach. Sometimes we pair share again if we're close. Lesson design, we talked about written definitions. And of course, the skill development is that one that I do one, you do one, I do one, you do one, and those process questions in between. Okay, so this will be the final wrap up. Oh, we talked a lot about instructional leadership, running the instructional program, being in the classroom to do coaching, understanding instructional terms, be ready to get in the classroom to coach yourself, and that idea of getting out in the classroom as part of your job, and managing the instructional program. So let's just see, I think we can go around with a couple of you and give you a couple of your ideas about something you learned today or something you could apply that you think would really help at your school. Okay, so write a couple things on your whiteboard so you're ready if I call on you. You're completely ready to go. Okay, let's see your whiteboards. Up, 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 up. This should be shown, aimed at me. So Derek, can you tell me something you could apply that you learned today?
Absolutely. I could apply a lot more student engagement, repetition, getting everybody involved over and over and over again, using all of the different ways of doing it. You can see how many times you can get to 24 without doing the same task. It's very neat to be able to get them to repeat it in different ways like that, because oftentimes kids will catch on to the same similar patterns and then not want to do it. So this gives them a very wide range of things to try where there isn't that repetition pattern of, oh, we're going to do the same thing over and over and over again. It's vastly different. So it's very engaging.
Yeah. Okay, very good. Vishal, something you could add?
Yeah, the first thing I think what I would apply is the policy of teach first and ask questions later. And when I'm asking questions, I think I'll use a whiteboard.
Yeah, the teach first is right here. Teach first, then ask a question. Okay, I have to say this because a lot of schools, a lot of classes will come up. Today we'll describe the process of photosynthesis. Their very next sentence is, who knows what photosynthesis is? And they haven't taught anything. And EDI, we always teach first, and I want to measure if the students are learning what I just taught, not just their general background knowledge. Okay, let's see, who else? Diraj, can you come up with something?
Sure. So I think one of the very different approaches and what I would use in India specifically is whiteboards, because we tend to have our teacher to student ratios really weird, because average student to teacher ratio, at least in the higher grades in India, is like 1:47. I think whiteboards would be a great strategy to sort of immediately look at who has understood, and it makes the teacher more effective really at that. So that is one of the big strategies I would want to implement in all classrooms. And the second thing is, I'll come back to you. I like that strategy because you are able to help with that strategy the weaker students in the classroom, and there are always those few, and it's really hard for a teacher in a large classroom to attend to them every time. So this helps them to sort of ensure that these would focus on what the teacher is teaching. I think those are the two major strategies I would want to implement in all classrooms here.
Yeah, I don't know if you have discipline problems or classroom management, but the feedback I just got from Texas was how well that I'll come back to you and these strategies work for forcing the students to participate. There's no tuning out. You had to have come up with an answer. You had to participate. And they actually wrote me a big email that was their big takeaway, was really managing the questions and getting all the students to participate. All right, Jeffrey, I know you're there. And maybe you could add one thing you've learned from today.
As Dheeraj said, I like the concept of whiteboard because the interaction of the students and the teacher would be much more effective when it comes to the whiteboard.
Yeah, because you sit there and as a teacher, I want to see all the whiteboards. I'm waiting for 2 more. Let's get them up. And it's
Yep.
very easy. You're right. It's very easy to let everybody do something. I'll just give one little note. There's always some student who's too slow. I said, just hold up your blank board. If you're not ready, you've had enough time, hold it. And if I call you, be ready to answer even if you haven't written it on your board. So it forces everyone to participate. I think we're ready to wrap it up today. So the big thing I think we can think about EDI, my takeaway from today is really student engagement. I think a lot of people talked about student engagement, and we're talking about student engagement at the academic level, not conversations in the playground or talking at low level. We're trying to justify our answers, complete sentences, analyzing the problems, explaining our thinking process, the teacher's thinking process. So I think student engagement is one of the big things we took away from today. So I think we're ready to go. I'll just read our motto at the bottom. All students successfully taught grade level work every day. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get that 80 to 100% day after day after day.
Thanks everybody for attending, watching it live or watching it recorded. We hope that you join us next week. We're going to be talking about building teacher confidence. John's going to be joining us again. We're going to be diving into some more tactics and strategies that you can learn about and maybe implement at your own school. So thank you all very much.